Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Raise Hail Report. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by a very special guest, the host of Get Up on ESPN, Mike Greenberg. Greenie, it's great to have you on.
It's great to be with you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And, getting right into it, I just want to talk about your journey in the sports industry to kick things off. Coming out of college, you became a sports anchor for WMAQ, and then you obviously had your show, Mike and Mike, from 2000 to 2017. With a background of working in the sports industry, what was that switch like when you became the host of Get Up, switching from radio to television?
So it was a pretty natural transition because the broad strokes of, you have it right, the broad strokes of what I had done in my career, but I had always been doing a little bit of multiple things.
Mhm,
So the transition from radio to TV, the first time was not that big. I guess the very, very first time in Chicago back in the 90s
mhm,
was a big transition, but I've sort of jumped back and forth in what I've been doing for most of my career. So this is the way I usually describe it for people.
mhm,
It's harder to do TV badly than it is to do radio badly.
mhm.
TV is harder in that regard than radio, but it's harder to do radio well than it is to do TV well.
Yep.
Doing radio well is really hard. It's an art. Um, it is the art of having a conversation that you want thousands and tens of thousands, and in our case, back in the Mike and Mike days, quite literally millions of people
Mhm,
listen to. And that's not an easy thing to do. And it takes a
mhm,
lot more work than it may at times seem. So the transition from that to doing a daily TV show was an interesting one, because the expectations of your audience is different. The things that people want is different. Sharing the stage, if you will,
mhm,
with, instead of just with one person, but with multiple people every day and different ones every
mhm,
single day, as we do on our show, that's its own kind of challenge as
mhm,
well. So it took a little time to get used to. I'd say it probably took me between 9 and 12 months to really feel like I kind of had it and we were in a groove and I
mhm,
knew what I was trying to do every day. And then it is a constant evolution. So
mhm,
the business changes, the industry changes, the demands of your audience changes, the way people are consuming it changes. So you try and stay current with all of those. So in some ways, this business, and maybe like most, is always changing. So there are some really big ones. I went from radio to
mhm.
TV. That feels like a very big change. But there are smaller incremental changes that you're going through every month, every 6 months, every year, regardless of whether you change mediums or not.
And then I think versatility has been a really big component of your career. One of those things that you can do is write. You're a New York Times bestselling author. You have a lot of books, including your new book, Got Your Legends, which was published on September 23rd. Can you just break down what that writing process looks like for you?
Sure. So I work with my researcher. His nickname is Hembo. Everyone calls him Hembo. His name is Paul
Mhm,
Hembekides. And I'll show you the book. This is the book. It's called Got
mhm,
Your Legends.
yep.
And here's what it's about. I think you, as a young sports fan, will really appreciate it. And I hope
Mhm,
will be able to learn from it. So my
mhm,
big passion is sports history. And I feel like if you're a young person who, as you obviously are, who's interested
mhm,
in sports media world, I commend you for what you were doing. Um, I think it is imperative that you know something about sports history.
mhm,
Nothing drives me more crazy than when I hear people in the sports media, people talking on the radio, for example, saying things like, well, I don't know much about that player. He was before my time. That's not good enough.
mhm,
You should have a working knowledge of things that happen in sports before you. So what we do with this book is we pick the Mount Rushmore, the franchise faces, the legends, the four greatest legends of every team in the four major sports. So
mhm,
every team in the NFL, the NHL, the
yep,
NBA, and Major League Baseball. The Mount Rushmore, the four most important people in the history of all of those franchises.
mhm,
Some of them are current, and some of them played decades ago, and some of them even played a century ago.
mhm,
And so, what I hope people will take from it is they'll be able to have discussion and debate. I agree with this. I disagree with that. Oh my God, I can't believe Greeny and Hembo made
mhm,
this decision instead of that one. That's the essence of what sports conversation is, and that's great. But I hope that whether you agree or disagree with me,
mhm,
that because of Hembo's outstanding research and my writing, you will learn about sports history. You'll learn about players and coaches and people that you didn't otherwise know about. And that'll make you a better sports fan, a more educated sports fan, and hopefully be entertaining along the way. So let's have some fun here. Matthew, what's your favorite team?
Washington Commanders.
Nola Sports. Okay, so the Washington Commanders is a tough one because most of their legends are pretty old. Do you want to try and guess who the Mount Rushmore of the franchise that, of course, dates back to being the Washington Redskins as a founding franchise of pro football? So it may be unfair to ask a young person to try and guess their Mount Rushmore, but so why don't I just tell it to you, unless you want to try and guess some of the names?
I mean, I'm sure we have Sammy Baugh, Art Monk on there, maybe those two guys.
Good. Okay. Sammy Baugh is correct. Sammy Baugh is the beginning of the lineage of great quarterbacks in pro football history. By the way, he also was a defense. In one season, he led the league in passing. He led the league in interceptions as a defender, and he led the league in punting. So obviously, it was a different sport then, but that's very good by you. Sammy Baugh, Jack Kent Cooke, who was the owner for a long time in Washington and kind of helped before there was Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones and other contemporary owners. He really was instrumental in reshaping the National Football League. Joe Gibbs, the legendary coach, and Darryl Green, who was probably the best player, if not number one, then number two best player in the history of the franchise, and on the short list of the greatest defensive backs that ever lived. That's the Mount Rushmore of that franchise, and we do that 124 times, and I write an essay about each one. May I also say, I am very proud of you that you immediately went to Sammy Baugh. That is a great job by you. I was not expecting you to know him, and I am very impressed that you do.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I love the concept of that book. And then, you have some ties to Chicago, obviously. You went to college at Northwestern, and then you became a sports anchor in Chicago right after that. What did you kind of expect your journey to look like following your time at WSCR Radio? Did you expect to go down the same path that you ended up taking?
Not really, because this path didn't exist. When I was in college, I wanted to be on SportsCenter. That was and I think remains the Rolls Royce of sports news and information broadcasting. And so I and everyone I knew in the industry wanted to be on SportsCenter. And I got to ESPN when they launched the network ESPN News in 1996, which was sort of a constant SportsCenter-esque, like every half hour we would do a new sportscast, catching people up on the news of the sports day. And I wanted to try and get onto SportsCenter. And there were no shows like Mike and Mike. There were no shows like Get Up. And then they started forming them. We put Mike and Mike together. They formed a radio network, and they put me together with Mike Golick, and we had success beyond my wildest imagination. And so I didn't imagine, when I was in school, I wouldn't have imagined that we would have a sports talk show on the radio, because there were no sports talk shows on the radio, or almost none. And then even when we started doing Mike and Mike, I never imagined that we would do it for 18 years or that we would have as much success as we did, because that just seemed far-fetched. I met presidents and were saying, take me out to the ball game at Wrigley Field. And we had all kinds of experiences that were beyond my wildest imagination. And now hosting a regular daily sports talk show, again, those things didn't exist when I was in college, on ESPN is the thrill of a lifetime. And it's beyond what I imagined. And then the cherry on top of the sundae is that I host ESPN Sunday coverage of the National Football League. And that's something that did exist when I was growing up. And it was probably beyond my wildest imagination. I never dreamt. I remember growing up watching Brian Gumbel and Brent Musburger and Howard Cosell hosting the National Football League. And I thought, those people were like gods to me. So I never would have imagined I would have the opportunity to do that. So I would say, Matthew, that my career has been beyond anything that I imagined it might be.
And now getting into some football, obviously the season recently started back up. You're a diehard New York Jets fan. They've started off 0-3. What have you taken away from their first 3 games? What are they going to have to do in order to turn their season around?
They stink. It's a tragedy, but the coach, who I am inclined to like because he played for the Jets, and I feel like he's not just he wasn't just taking any coaching job. I think he recognized in his own mind some importance of being part of the Jets organization. And I like that. And so I like him. He was a very good player for the Jets. But he said the other day after they lost to Tampa that, if we proved anything, is that we're not the same old Jets. Well, unfortunately, they sort of are. Mm-hmm. The Jets generally aren't terrible. They invent terrible ways to lose. There are some franchises that are just bad. The Browns have been bad for 20 years. The Jets have a different kind of agony that they put their fans through. They give you hope, and then they pull it away at the last second, and they rip your heart out of your chest, and they throw it on the ground, and they set fire to it, and then they drive a truck over it, and then they back up over it again. And that's kind of what this season has been. The first game against Pittsburgh, they had every chance to win, and they found excruciating ways to lose. Second week, they didn't show up at all against Buffalo. If the team bus had gotten rerouted, that game would have been equally competitive to what it was. And then this week, they fall way behind through three quarters by playing just terribly. Then they make a little bit of a comeback in the fourth quarter, get a miracle play to take the lead. Then the defense blows it. They lose on a last-second field goal. And the coach wants to tell me how proud the fans should be of the fight that the team showed. I'm not interested in that anymore. The team hasn't been in the playoffs in 14 years. I don't want to see them fight. I want to see them win. And unfortunately, through 3 weeks, they haven't yet. They play Miami on Monday night in an early game. They play 7 p.m. on Monday night. ESPN, we have a doubleheader on Monday night. The Jets are the early game. If the Jets lose that game, their season is over. I think whoever loses that game, their season is over. And so I really hope that doesn't happen because, you wait a really long time for your season to come as a fan, and for it to be over in 4 weeks would be very deflating.
Absolutely. And then another team who has had a rough start is the Chiefs. They're 1-2 with losses to the Chargers and Eagles. They've made the Super Bowl 5 times in the last 6 years. With their start, are they still the team to beat in the AFC right now, or has that window kind of passed at this point?
I do not think it has passed. I'm not. If you're saying are they the team to beat, if I'm going to interpret that question as if I were picking one team to win the AFC right now, would I pick them? I probably would not. But I definitely would not write them off. There's too much there. I'm not writing off Patrick. I'm not writing off Andy Reid. They're going to get people back. They're going to get Xavier Worthy back. They're going to get Rashee Rice back. They're going to make good moves. They're going to get better as the season goes on. I would bet right now that they will make the playoffs for sure. And I think they will be a tough out when they get there. Now, at this moment, I think Buffalo looks like the team to beat in the AFC. The Chargers, I think, are legit, 100% legit. That said, if you look at the Chiefs' 2 losses, they lost 1-score games to the Eagles and the Chargers, who are both 3-0. The Eagles game, if Travis Kelce holds on to a ball that he catches 99 out of 100 times, the Chiefs might win that game. The Charger game is the opening game of the season played in Sao Paulo, Brazil, on a weird field. 1-score game. It could have gone either way. So I'm definitely not writing off the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that when push comes to shove, they will be fine.
And then I want to play a little game where I'm going to give you a few teams who have gotten off to a hot start, and I want you to tell me if you think they are a contender or a pretender. This is kind of a rapid fire game, if you will. So the first team is the Los Angeles Chargers.
Definite contender.
You like what they've done to start the season?
And they hired Jim. So I have been around so long. I covered Jim Harbaugh as a player. He was the quarterback of the Bears when I was working in Chicago and covered them. So I've known Jim for over 30 years. When they hired him, I said, give him 3 years and he'll have them in the Super Bowl. He might be a year ahead of that projection. I think the Chargers are legit.
Next team, we have the San Francisco 49ers. I know they have a lot of injuries, but they've still managed to be 3-0.
Look, they're really good. But I would, if we're going to define it as do I think they're going to make a deep playoff run, I will say pretender. They losing Bosa for the season is devastating. Kittle has turned out to be a somewhat injury-prone player. Purdy gets banged up. McCaffrey has a history of injuries. I have all the respect in the world for all of those players, and especially for their coach, who I think is elite, Kyle Shanahan. But I don't expect them to be among the last team standing in the NFC.
Mhm. Following that, probably the most confusing and unexpected team we've seen be good this year so far, Indianapolis Colts.
So I would never allow anyone on my show to answer, I don't know.
Mhm,
So, so don't let me. My honest answer is I'm not sure.
mhm,
I think they are legitimately good, but I'm going to need to see them
mhm,
with Buffalo, with Baltimore, with the Chargers. We're going to
mhm.
find out a lot
Yeah.
about them as we go. I think
Mhm,
Steichen has done an unbelievably good job with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was always a better player than he was perceived to be at the end in New York, which is to say people talked about him like he was terrible. He's not terrible. He's an
mhm,
average NFL quarterback. And average NFL quarterbacks on good teams with good coaching can play very well, and that's what he is doing.
mhm,
But do I think they'll be this good? Like, he's putting up numbers that I just can't fathom he's going to
mhm.
maintain. So do I think the Colts will be, one of the last two teams standing in the AFC? I would bet not.
And then the last team I have for you, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh, definitely contenders.
Mhm,
They're banged up right now. They'll get Mike Evans back. The rookie Emeka Ibuka. So I also host the draft. So
yeah,
I study these players. Emeka Ibuka is a stud. He is the real deal. Baker is playing great. That defense is great. Todd Bowles is an elite defensive coach. I definitely think they're legit, and I think their division is bad. Carolina is bad.
mhm,
New Orleans is bad. Atlanta is, I don't know what the heck is going on there.
Yep.
So there's a huge advantage in playing in a weak division because maybe you bank a bunch of extra wins. So maybe all of a sudden, whoever wins a very tough NFC West has to come to Tampa in the playoffs. Whoever wins the very tough NFC North has to come to Tampa in the playoffs. I think Tampa is
Mhm.
absolutely a contender.
And then I know we're obviously just 3 weeks into the season, but if you could call your shot in September, what's your prediction for the Super Bowl this year?
I called it before the season started, and I
Mhm,
don't see any reason to change it. My preseason prediction was Buffalo over Detroit in the Super Bowl,
mhm,
Bills over the Lions. I don't see any obvious reason to change that. Lions scared me a little bit week one, but
mhm,
they have bounced back and look very much like the
mhm,
best team, which is what they've been for the last couple of years. And the Bills, I mean, I think Josh is just special, and
mhm,
I hope he gets one. I really hope, for the sake of both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, that at some point in their careers they
mhm,
win. They can't both win it this year. I hope one of them does, because they're too good to have to not
yep,
be historically great. And
mhm,
the reality is, no one will put them in historical context. No one will talk about them with the
mhm,
great quarterbacks of all time until and unless they win a championship.
mhm,
And they're both good enough to deserve that. So I
mhm,
hope one of them does, because they're both that good. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, the minute either of them wins a championship, they go on the list of the greatest quarterbacks ever.
yep.
So I picked Buffalo before the season, Buffalo over Detroit, and I'll stay with that.
Now I do have one final question before we wrap things up. If you could go back and tell your younger self one thing about the sports media industry as a whole, what would that be?
I love that question. Um, I think what I would say to, I guess the way to interpret that question is to say, what advice would I give a young person like yourself who wants to be a
Mhm,
sports announcer?
mhm,
I would say the most important word to use is nimble. Be nimble, which means I don't know where the industry is going. You
mhm,
don't know where the industry is going.
mhm,
But what I know for sure is that there will always be a place for people like me and people like you who create good, compelling, quality sports content. And where that place is, how people consume it, whether they stream it or they listen to it or they watch it on the internet or they watch it on a television or they
mhm,
listen to it on the radio or they read it in a book or they read it on an iPad or whatever comes next, whatever ideas are still out there that we haven't even come up with yet as a civilization. There will always be a place for people who do what we do, but you
mhm,
need to be nimble and you need to adapt what you're doing to whatever the market demands.
mhm.
So I guess I would say to the younger me, I'm proud of you. Or maybe the younger me would say to me now, I'm proud of you.
Mhm,
And that as the industry evolved, you didn't allow yourself to get left behind.
mhm,
I
mhm.
have young kids. How old are you, Matthew, if you don't mind my asking?
14.
Okay, yes. So I have kids who are much older than you are.
Mhm,
So I think by having them in my life, I have seen things through their eyes a little bit. I know what music young people are listening to. I know what
mhm,
TV shows
mhm.
people are watching. I know the way they're consuming sports. My son, who's 22, is a crazy sports fan, as you
Mhm.
obviously are now, and he consumes sports totally differently than I did. He
Yeah.
gets a lot of his sports news and information and entertainment from TikTok. He is, while we're watching games, he is constantly on multiple devices
Mhm,
doing multiple things. I don't do any of that. I can't multitask that way. But so what I'm saying is the stuff that your generation is going to want in sportscasters in a generation from now, 20 years from now, is going to
mhm,
be totally different from what my audience wants. And so
mhm,
you need to do that. You need to figure out, what does my audience want? How
mhm,
are they going to consume this? How do they want to consume it? What makes it easy for them? What's going to entertain them? What's going to inform them? And then you need to adapt what you do to that. So I'm proud that I feel like I have done that pretty well
mhm,
over 30 years in the business, and my plan is to keep doing that for many more.
mhm.
And it would be my advice to you.
Absolutely. I really, really appreciate that advice, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up, including where they can find some of your work?
Oh, well, you can find my work on ESPN quite literally every day of the week during football season.
Mhm,
And again, the book is called Got Your Legends, and it is a great deal of fun. And if there are a lot of young people listening to this, I would love for you to read the book so that you
sure.
will learn about sports history, so that, like Matthew, you will know people like Sammy Baugh, which I think is fantastic. So again, it's called Got Your Legends. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere that books are sold. And the author is me, Mike Greenberg.
Absolutely. And if you made it up to this point, make sure you like and subscribe. It's completely free, helps the channel grow a ton. I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Mike Greenberg on the Raise Hail Report. And as always, we will see you next time.